second video that I filmed in like 3 months, 2 months, I don't know. It's been so long. I'm so sorry, guys. Anyway, today I'm here for a very exciting video, which is that I've been chosen to be one of this month's participants for 10 for 12 for May. If you haven't heard of 10 for 12 before, it's a really lovely little collaboration that is organised by Steve from the Lawn Gnome. Check out his channel and he will be able to explain what this deal is far better than I will. But basically it involves, I think, 10 YouTubers being chosen to share their top 10 on a particular topic. And we all share our videos on the same day, so there's a topic that is chosen by Steve and we all pick our own things and are given complete autonomy over how we film our video, when we film our video, etc., as long as we are sharing our top 10 for this particular topic, and then we all get to share it on the same day. So that's what I'm doing today, and today's topic, in honor of BookCon, is to share our top 10 reads that we have discovered thanks to Booktube. All of these books have been completely just written down in a random order as they have occurred to me, so please do not like take any stock from this particular order. This is not a rank of favoritism. These are just books that I remember that I've read and loved because of Booktube. That being said, first book on the list is, of course, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. If they are a series, I have included all of the books in the series in one spot on the list rather than taking up the entire list with every individual book in a series. So the first one is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. We all know how much I love this book right now. I cannot stop thinking about how good it is. I don't know why I love it so much, but I just do. It's a fantasy heist, which I've discovered is like my favorite genre. I don't know why, it just is. I'm all about that fantasy heist life. The next book on this list is also King of Scars, which is a separate series, which is why it's allowed to count, but this is also by Leigh Bardugo, also set in the same world, and it follows Nikolai Lantsov, who is the king of one of the particular countries in this world, and I adored it. I was a little bit disappointed that it ended on such a blatant cliffhanger for the next book, which will be coming out this time next year-ish, but that's fine. That happens sometimes. I did love the book. I love being introduced to new characters and also seeing character growth from characters that I already know and love from previous series. I read it all in like a day. Just good times, good light-hearted times. Next on this list is all of the ACOTAR series, which it was going to appear. I very much enjoyed those books. I know that they're not the greatest of books, but I did very much enjoy them. Especially the second one. The second one would be like my highest ranked from the series. We all know how this works. This is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast combined with a retelling of like Persephone and Hades, the story of Persephone and Hades. So good stuff, lighthearted, not always the best writing, but an immersive world, excellent world building, lovely characters that you want to bring them into your home and give them a cup of tea and love them. As my housemate again. Next book on this list is a complete departure in terms of genre, and it is Homegoing by Ya Jesse, which is a book that I read pretty much right at the beginning of my Booktube career. This was the historical fiction-ish / contemporary fiction novel that follows two sisters, one of whom becomes married to a slave driver and the other one ends up becoming a slave and getting taken over to America as a slave. And it follows the subsequent generations of those sisters and like the impacts that each generation has on the next generation and the path that they take and the consequences of all of the actions of both those original sisters and everyone who's followed after them. The next book on my list is The Hate Race by Maxine Beneba Clark, which I will be making a video about at some point because I really have lots of good things to say about this book. This is a book that I read earlier this year, partly because of uni, but also mainly because I already knew about it from Booktube. This was by an Australian author, a black woman who was born in Sydney and grew up in Sydney, and it's basically a memoir talking about her experience growing up in primary school and in high school in times of kind of peak racism in Australia, and she talks about the bullying that she endured and the sort of systematic racism of the teachers that didn't support her when she was struggling with bullying. A combination coming of age story and also expose on the racism that people have experienced in Australia growing up in Australia. So a really powerful, not a very happy book, but a really powerful, really well written book to read. Next book on this list is going back to fantasy, although adult fantasy now, and that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This book was a book that I didn't necessarily love completely in and of itself, but I loved the moment when I read it, and it has become like this really beautiful moment and memory in my life of reading this book in autumn, and it just felt really atmospheric and really lovely to read. Sitting there and reading these beautiful descriptions of this autumn scenery in the book and being able to look out my window and see the same kind of atmosphere and scenery in my own world around me. It's just kind of really stuck with me as a really, really lovely reading experience that I will keep for a very long time. Next on this list is a book that I read not even that long ago for my fantasy adventure-a-thon, and that is The Golem and the Jinni. This is a book that had been on my radar since like my very beginnings of Booktube, when I remember watching Thoughts on Tomes do a review about this book and talk about it, and I realized that it was something that I would probably very much enjoy, but it took me a long time to eventually get around to reading it. So this book is about a golem, which is from sort of Jewish mythology, and a Jinni, which is from Islamic mythology, which is where the concept of the genie comes from. And they've both ended up in New York with kind of no real understanding of how or why they've ended up in New York, and they end up meeting each other in New York, and they have this really lovely friendship and relationship that grows from being these two magical creatures in a world full of just normal, ordinary New York human beings. Next on this list is a book called Kissing the Witch, which is another book that I read for the Fantasy Adventure-a-thon. This is a book that I discovered thanks to Lauren Wade, although at the time she was called Reads and Daydreams. There's the Housemaid again. This is a collection of fairy tale retellings that is kind of set in a time loop, although it's less so than I thought it was when I first read it. They're all feminist retellings of fairy tales that we know. The thing that I liked most about these particular fairy tale retellings is that the motivations and the ways in which the plot moves is really very fluid and very different to the way that you expect the standard version of the fairy tale to go. That was something that I thought was quite refreshing, because I feel like a lot of even general fairy tale retellings still very much stick with trying to make characters make the same decisions for the same reasons to keep that plot going the way that we expect it to from those original fairy tales. But this book just threw that out the window and was like, you know what, I'm just gonna change characters around, make people do things for completely different reasons, and you still get the same kind of overarching story but just with completely different motivations, and that was really refreshing to read. Next book on this list is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, which is a book that I read probably in March last year. Oh, I don't remember when, who cares? So Strange the Dreamer, the main character, his name is Laszlo Strange, and he is a big bookworm. He works in a library, like a big city library, not just like a normal library, but like the one library of the entire capital kind of library. And he is absolutely obsessed with this city that used to be around called Weep, but for some reason at some point in history the city has just been completely like wiped from the world's, and like no one knows where it is anymore. No one hears from anyone who used to live in this city. Like there's no more records of any communication with the city from a certain point, but he is obsessed with the concept of this city. And then throughout the story he actually manages to find this lost city. I won't go into the details of how or why, but he ends up going to the city and gets, you know, drawn into his own kind of adventure novel and becomes the hero of this story based around this lost city of Weep. So really lovely book, really lighthearted. And then the final book on this list is A Monster Calls by someone. Is it Patrick Ness? Most people by now have heard about A Monster Calls because it is very popular on YouTube. This is the book about the little boy. His mother is very sick with cancer and he is grieving or trying to come to terms with his grief and his emotions surrounding the fact that his mother is very close to dying of cancer. He is visited, I think 3 times by a monster, and each time the monster visits him he tells him a story, teaches him something about coming to terms with his grief and processing his grief and loss. And it's really truly beautifully written. Just a really gorgeous, really meaningful, really heartfelt book that will guaranteed make you cry many tears, but is worth it. And I think it's a really powerful and really important book. And that's it. That's my 10. That's my 10 for 12. Thank you so much, Steve, for letting me be involved in this. I thoroughly enjoyed going through my Goodreads and remembering all of the books that I've read because of Booktube. There are so many books that I've read, so many that I've loved, so many that I haven't, and all kinds of books in between, and it just reminds me how grateful I am to be a part of this community, because there are books here that I just would never have discovered without the help of this community and the fact that we all celebrate books regardless of genre, regardless of when it was written, whether it's a new release or an old release. Like, all we're doing is celebrating the books that we love and the books that we want to read. So thank you to you, the community, and thank you to Steve for letting me be a part of this little collaboration project. I will see you for another video very shortly, I'm sure, and until then, as always, stay classic. Mwah.
Sit there and count your little fingers. Unhappy little girl blue.